So, looking at today's review, we're starting with the Focal Elear. Now, this is quite an old headphone, but it is still sold today. So, even though it is quite a few years old, I think it still holds up in today's competition, especially if you do a quick pad swap and a couple other things, or if you're willing to put some EQ to this headphone. So, we'll be talking about that in this review. So, the Focal Elear comes in at around quite a high price tag. I will cover the price later once I actually figure it out, but it is not cheap. In Australia, I see it often for around 1.5k without discounts. However, these days, most of the time you can find the Focal Elears on pretty big discounts. I've seen them as low as something in the ballpark of $600. I think that's what they're getting sold at currently in Australia. So, very good price for a superbly built headphone and something that actually sounds pretty decent. So, starting off first with the build, it is very solid. You have quite a thick headband here, back some pleather, and around the sides pleather as well, and in the part that touches your head, you can probably see it's got some fabric on there. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of this choice of design because I think that the fabric might wear out over time, but this unit has been here for quite a while and the fabric has held up, so I want to give it the benefit of the doubt. However, I will say I prefer a leather part for the component that touches your head. Now, moving on, you can see here the Focal logo here, very, very stylish, and you've got very strong metal yokes that hold actual cups of the headphone. Now, these yokes have a bit of swivel, as you can see, and this swivel helps really kind of fit most head shapes and sizes, as well as you get a good amount of adjustments, so all the way from there to there, so quite a large chunk, and I think this should probably fit most heads. And also the mechanism within here feels very solid. I'm quite confident its ability to hold up over time, and overall it's very well engineered. Moving on to the cups, you can see the Focal logo there with the name of the headphone, Elear, along with small letters, made in France, aluminium, magnesium chassis, things like that. But again, it's very understated but very stylish. Also has a metal grate there, which I think there's also a bit of mesh underneath it, and I think again that helps block some of the dust to go in. Moving on to the sides, you've got a bit of plastic around the edge of the cup. Here you have dual 3.5mm jacks, so very easy to replace cables. And inside, you can see there is a velour pad along with a angle driver, dynamic driver inside. So overall, this headphone is very well engineered, very stylish. It is a little heavy, but there's plenty of padding all around to make the comfort still pretty good in my books. So, moving on to the actual sound, starting with the frequency response. For this headphone, there's a clear bass emphasis. The bass is definitely toned up here, and the mid-range I think is overall pretty good. However, the treble is where I have the most problems, because to my ears, it sounds like there's a bit of a dip in the upper mids to all the way towards mid treble. There seems to be a bit of a dip there, and I hear a lot of or I don't hear a lot of information there. Seems to be a lot of missing details, and it's very recessed compared to rest of the frequency response, and I think that's an issue because, again, for something at this price, I really want to have a more complete frequency response, and this isn't an issue over just a one certain frequency like 9k or something being recessed having a dip. It is a large chunk that's missing, so that is a bit concerning. However, it does come back again in the treble after that region, and it's okay from there on, but again, that region is the most problematic. But other than that, the bass in the mid-range overall, I think in my books, is very nice. It's definitely on the warmer side overall in terms of the frequency response, but I think a lot of people will like that warm sound. It is not going to be very harsh for most tracks, and it's going to be a very pleasing listen. Now, moving on to the actual technicality, soundstage is reasonably wide, not very wide, I'd say, not class leading, but it will give you a good amount of width. It's definitely wider than HD 650 or 600, not as nowhere as wide as an HD 800, obviously. Against a Sundara, I think it is still wider than a Sundara. It is, you get a good amount of width with this. It is not as tall as a Sundara though, but again, that's a different story. It's a plain magnetic driver, big drivers, all that. So good soundstage. Imaging, I think it's good. It's not amazing, but I think it's okay for its price. And does seem to be reasonably tight actually. Don't really have much issues with imaging. Moving on to detail. The detail, it's hard to assess because of that missing piece of information in the upper mids to treble. It really makes it hard to judge the actual resolution in that area. I did fix this problem with EQ, and after that it seems to be actually fairly resolving. So in my opinion, I think this headphone overall draws a good amount of detail. I think it's probably comparable to something along the lines of I think it is at least as resolving as a Sundara. Because maybe even more so, because from what I hear, the LX uses the same driver as these, and if that's the case, then this is a very capable driver. Is it going to resolve as well something as such as a Nanda or a Clear or HD 800? No, it is not going to. I don't think so. Compared to my HD 800, it does not resolve like that, not even close. But it does resolve better than a lot of the mid-range / budget headphones you're gonna buy. So overall, I think that maybe for detail, I'll put this somewhere along the ballpark of DT 1990s. Maybe it resolves somewhere like that. But again, that it is really held back by that frequency response. So if you want to hear that resolution in that area, you're really gonna have to use EQ, or you're gonna have to perhaps invest in some LX pads to try and sort that issue out. LX pads are pretty cheap though, from what I've seen. But so it might be investment if you do already have these headphones. Now moving on to one other issue of the sound, which I often forgot to talk about in my reviews, but dynamics. Now this is one of the strong points of this headphone. This is I think most of the Focal line are incredibly dynamic. The dynamic range is excellent, and quiet sounds sound very quiet, but loud sounds sound very loud. And I think that's one of the strengths of this driver, along with the incredible bass extension for a dynamic driver. That's one of the things I probably should mention. This extends very well into the sub bass for a dynamic driver. But again, back to the dynamics. There's a great amount of slam. There's a great amount of distinction between quiet and loud sound. Sorry, quiet, yes, and loud sounds. So again, that's something that I think can be very, I think, ahead of the competition for this headphone in that regard. So overall, again, great headphone. However, I think the only issue is just the small frequency response, or the large frequency response issues in the upper mids to all the way towards mid treble that can really take away from the technical capabilities of this driver, which is actually quite good. Great slam, good soundstage, good imaging, pretty good detail, even in current competition, and again, just very pleasing warm sound. However, again, I just wish that one issue could be solved. Now, from what I hear, the Focal LX solves all these issues and is also cheaper. So if you do see the Focal LX or are interested in that, I think go for it. If that sounds like what I think it sounds like, it should be an amazing headphone. If you do have a Elear, or you do see one on sale and you want to try and fix the issues, definitely try EQ. But if you're not really a fan of EQ, which I think a lot of people aren't, I think LX pads are the way to go. I think they're available from Mass Shop for about 50 USD. So I think that's a worthy investment if you have these headphones or are planning to buy it. So overall, great headphone. But one thing I do need to mention is the cable it comes with is... It's good. It's a good cable, good quality, but it is way too heavy. It is way too long. I don't see anyone using this length of cable. I'm not gonna bother unwrapping it because it is way too long. So maybe try buy another cable, shorter one to use with these headphones. Luckily, they do use 3.5mm connectors, so should be fairly easy to find replacement cables for this headphone. Feel free to check out any of my other reviews. Ananda review coming up next.